Okay, so back again. I spent last night, I watched part two of the Oxygen special called The Witnesses. And this evening, I finally got to watch part one. So, yeah, I saw them in reverse order. And then proceeded to rewatch part two as well. So now I've seen the whole thing from start to finish. But I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about part one as well as part two. So, first of all, the story of Debbie and Dolores, my eyes just kept welling up every time I saw these two incredibly strong and brave women telling their story, talking about what happened. I'm so very, very grateful that the two of them teamed up and didn't allow the culture of hush hush and no reproach on Jehovah's name to stop them from speaking their truth and what happened to them. One thing I did find as we listened to Debbie's story is there's some memories that were brought up for me. And while I was never sexually abused as a child. If you watched my story, then you know that I was physically abused as a child by the people that call themselves my parents. I do not call them mom and dad or mother, father. I call them by their first names, Bruce and Robin. But one of the things that Debbie's story kind of reminded me of, she talked about how this man, Ronald Lawrence, I believe his name was, he would use his position of power to basically make Debbie available to him. And I mean, if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, then you know that, like, what the elders say goes, unless it's absolutely crazy. But even then, as they're told, if it doesn't seem to make sense from a human point of view, just shut up and go along with it, because these men are supposedly gifts from God. That's kind of a sickening sentiment, really. But it definitely sets up the perfect environment for a pedophile to operate. So this man, this monster, Ronald Lawrence, using his position of authority to gain access to Debbie as a child and to molest her and everything while out in service. I was kind of reminded of, as a kid, back when the congregations had like the individual congregation book study groups. There was one book study group that I remember being in where week after week after week, when the study conductor would do the service groups, he would always say, like, oh yeah, and he's going to come with us. And I always wound up working in the car with him, his wife, and like a couple of other people. And like, I want to say, like, I was never molested, but it was the most boring kind of service, because it meant just sitting in the car, sometimes alone with this guy, being bored out of my tree even more than I could be if I was just going door to door. The only times whenever I actually really enjoyed it was there was one of his daughters who was a few years older than me. She was a genuinely nice person, and I really enjoyed her company. And even though I was a few years younger than her, she actually tried to, well, she didn't try to, she really was like a genuine friend to me. So anyway, I digress. The point especially that really like kind of drove home this idea about like him having like the power, like getting back to Ronald Lawrence and having the power. The book study conductor that I had, it got to a point where I actually used to beg Bruce and Robin, like, can you, when he's doing the car groups, can you please say that you want me to work with you? And they're like, why? because service with him is like this and that and the other thing. And like, well, he's a study conductor, so what he says goes. And even over like the pleadings of their son, they took sides with the elders' authority and so on. So what this kind of says to me, and like if you're a non-witness, if you've never been a witness and you're not like, fully able to appreciate like the level of power that elders wield over the congregation. Even one Unitarian minister that I talked to, he said that like any person that winds up in a clergy position, they automatically are given like a great deal of power and implicit trust because they're members of the clergy. But this Unitarian minister, he also had to go through like psychological testing and pre-screening and everything else. Elders don't have to do that, but they're given the same level of authority over congregants that like this Unitarian minister or a Catholic priest could be given just without any of the screening. And unfortunately, with these elders and what we've seen from a number of Catholic priests, the end result is the same. If they're not the ones that are molesting children, then at the very least they are complicit or know about it. And that especially is something that stood out for me in Debbie's case. Getting back to the special, something that really stood out to me, there was it was revealed that her own father, who was also an elder in, and bear with me if I get my facts incorrect, I should have taken notes, but I believe she said that in 1994, the elders in that congregation became aware of what kind of a monster they had on their hands with Ronald Lawrence. So that meant that even her father knew. Now, the abuse took place back in, I think they said the year was 1976. So maybe he didn't know yet, because I think she said that she didn't speak up until a bit later. But then 4 or 5 years later, she speaks up thanks to having Dolores as like a second witness. Like now you have two people that are coming forward with the same kinds of accounts about the same person. So 4 or 5 years later, after her father has learned about Ronald Lawrence's past, he still winds up siding with Watchtower, even against his own daughter. And even that idea that when she speaks out and everything else and whatnot, he says to her, like, you're going to pay for this. I'm going to make you pay for this. And yeah, this is how elders behave, especially if you have like a great deal of power. In the case of my brother, and he's going to be appearing on the channel at some point soon in an interview we're doing. But in the case of my brother, I remember when he was disfellowshipped as a teenager, the presiding overseer of the congregation that we were in literally said to him, "We're going to make an example out of you." Like, it's like they didn't see him as a human being anymore. It was like, no. We're going to make you an object of terror for anybody else, any of you other young hooligans that want to step out of line, basically. That's what that boiled down to. So, angering and saddening all at the same time as I watched the whole special. The fact that like this isn't like something new, the fact that it's been going on for even longer than I've been alive, and as of this recording, I'm 40 years old. So, like, I was born into an organization that was already covering up pedophilia. I was raised in an organization, in a cult, by like Bruce and Robin. Bruce having had like, he has absolute disgust and loathing in his heart for the Catholic Church and all things Catholic, because that was the family that he was raised in, and he saw his fair share of BS, I guess. Um, to think that he is now part of another organization that is being exposed as committing all of the same atrocities as the one that he thinks is stupendously dirty and awful and everything else. Like, in the end, they wind up being exactly the same. And this whole like systemic ripping apart of families, even in the case of like covering up things like murder, like murder. Really? Murder is less worthy of reporting than, oh, you were smoking a cigarette, we're going to have to haul you into the back room. Like, watching Trey Bundy talk about this, so many times he kind of did his own version of the face palm. And he, like, for him, like having to investigate this for 5 or 6 years, I mean, yeah, like it boggles the mind for people like myself that grew up in it and left. Whether you've left like recently or in the more, let's say, more than a few years ago, you're always you're thinking to yourself like, oh, why did I fall for this? Why did I, why? And if there's one thing that I especially want to say to anyone that is looking in the mirror after leaving and thinking like, why did I fall for it? Why did I, you know what? It doesn't reflect badly on you. Okay. We all want something better than a lot of times what we see in the world. When we hear about trouble in the Middle East, or oh, the crime rate in insert city or province or state here is rising, or this disease here, like right now we have the coronavirus outbreak and people are worried and afraid. So along comes the witnesses with this hope for the future, and they give you the soft sell and everything. Really, that's what we were all brought up in, the soft sell. That's what, maybe if we're like, second or third generation witnesses or witness families or whatever, that's what our grandparents or great grandparents or whatever were told. Like, thinking of the book Millions Now Living Will Never Die. They want to say it's may never die, but it was will never die. I mean, wow, what an amazing kind of propaganda to sell people on. So if you're newly awake and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, why did I waste my life with that? Or why did I fall for that? Or, oh, all of that time. Don't beat yourself up. That's the most important thing that I can honestly say, is don't beat yourself up. These women that in part 1 of the Oxygen special, we saw them again at the end of part 2, and they were saying like that they're planning to file a lawsuit of their own this year. And I think Dolores was saying that every step forward just makes them feel more powerful and stronger for the next step after that, and the next step after that. And as I said in my Life After Watchtower video, keep growing, keep expanding as a human being. Don't stop. Don't slide backwards. Like, keep moving forward. Keep looking forward. Yeah, Watchtower happened to us, and Watchtower is happening to other people. So, don't give up. Don't fall into despair, and like, definitely seek help if you need it. I can't stress that enough. Thoughts overall on the entire special: I'm so glad it was made. I'm so glad that this information is coming out from more well-known like reporters and everything. It was a bit of a trip to see some of those clips and letters and everything else, and think like, hey, those are the same clips and letters and everything that I have had in my videos and I've seen in other videos, and whatever else, like, like the same kind of source material. Like, how can you not take it seriously, right? So anyway, those are my thoughts. I think it was a fantastic special. I'm very grateful to Trey Bundy for all of his hard work. Very grateful to Erwin Zalkin and other lawyers that were featured. I wish I could remember their names, but I'm very grateful for the work that they're doing to help bring justice, not just to Watchtower's victims, but to other victims and survivors as well. Yeah, as Trey said, he says, like, sooner or later, enough of the public is going to be disgusted and outraged enough that they're going to have to force change, or that their Watchtower is going to have to change or crumble, or, like, die on the sword of this one way or another. I have other thoughts about Watchtower as well, and I'm gonna do like other videos for that. But one thing that I want you all to keep really firmly in mind, at the start of part one, Trey Bundy used the words to describe Watchtower. He says that it is the corporation that is in charge of Jehovah's Witnesses. Keep that word in mind, corporation. Okay. At any rate, yeah, those are my thoughts, and I hope you all have a wonderful day or evening or afternoon whenever you're watching this, and we'll be talking to you soon.